Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Gen Z Unfiltered. I'm Ishkirat, and as always, I'm here joined by Amrit. Hi, Amrit. How are you doing today?
Hi, Shkirat. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good as well. So, first off, I have to ask you a question. Are you ready? So, have you ever been told or have you heard of someone say, look at the brighter side, be optimistic, look at the glass half full rather than half empty? Have you ever been told anything along these lines?
Yeah, like all the time. Everyone says to be optimistic and be positive and see the sunny side of things, but I don't really know exactly how to do that.
Exactly. And today, to get some insight and possibly an answer to this, we are joined by Jasleen Nijjar, who is in her final year as a medical student at the University of Calgary's Cumming School of Medicine. Jasleen was born and raised here in Calgary, and this is where she did all of her schooling as well. Today, we speak to her about her journey and transition from middle school to high school, then to undergrad, and then med school. So let's please welcome Jasleen Nijjar to the show.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Hi,
Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's
thank
a
you for
pleasure having
joining.
you. Absolutely, yes. So, you're in your final semester of med school. How does that feel to be so close to completing or accomplishing all these goals you had set out for yourself?
So I would say equally exciting and equally nerve-wracking. So we're actually 3 weeks away from being done this last rotation. And then at that point, I've got a nice little title beside my name, which is really quite terrifying to think about because I think this last year and a half has been really quite a journey, especially given that we did it throughout COVID. So things were constantly changing and we were constantly adapting. And so this is just another transition point at this point, which is something I'd like to think I've gotten good at over the last year is going with the flow, rolling with the punches, seeing, what's next and adapting accordingly. But this feels like a little bit of a bigger jump. So I'm a little bit nervous in that sense. On the other side of the token, definitely excited to be transitioning into residency. I don't know where I'll be, so I can't actually tell you guys that at all. But within the next couple of weeks, that'll be something I find out as well. So being able to think about moving, if that's where that's what I'm destined to do, and then the actual program that I'm in will be another transition point. So exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time, I would say.
Okay, well, that's awesome. Congratulations for almost reaching the end. And thank you for being a healthcare worker. You are honestly such a hero. And as you mentioned that you had to adapt and overcome all of these challenges, and the fact that you did that in such a pressurized time, I think that's so amazing. But when did you first know that you wanted to be a doctor, Jasleen?
Yeah, great question. So I think early on in high school, I really liked bio, and I really thought that was something I wanted to be. Sorry, that was something I wanted in my career moving forward. And so I think as a high school student, I didn't really have a whole lot of career exploration, and so the obvious choice to me was that the next step would be to do an undergrad and then apply to medical school at that point. A lot of my friends from high school went into university with the same mentality, and then as university students, I think we got a lot more exposure to what else was out there career wise. And a lot of people ended up changing their minds. For me, in a degree in kinesiology, I was constantly learning about anatomy, physiology, human growth and development, aging, disease, and nutrition, health, all of these things that really solidified for me that medicine was the place where I wanted to be. I worked as a receptionist and physiotherapist assistant all throughout undergrad as well. And so constantly seeing patients in that element and being able to form these really amazing connections with people who were coming in again and again and again was really another point for me of, yeah, I think this is something that I would be a good fit for. And I was also volunteering with kids all throughout. And so I really loved working with kids. I really liked that it was like these silly interactions that you could have with them. So I started medical school thinking that I wanted to be a pediatrician, and I'm definitely still in that thinking now. But I applied to 2 different residency specialties, and we'll see which one I end up in. I think I'll be happy in either. So really happy in that element. But I think it was something that was always in the back of my mind, but the reasons for it were always changing.
That's amazing. Will have to say I adore that you are always looking at the bright side of things rather than thinking that, hey, I'd rather go in this residency than that. Just being accepting of both and seeing that positive side, that's great. And you've done so much volunteer work, as you just mentioned, and medical school is quite a journey, as we all know. So how did you manage to stay focused with something that's possibly, in my opinion, one of the most intimidating things?
Right. So I would say I'm definitely somebody who is guided quite a bit by balance. So when people talk about work hard, play hard, I like to believe that I live by that. So I do think that having something else going on in your life outside of your academic setting really sets you up to be successful. It's a nice outlet away from whatever stressor you might have. So in high school, I was really focused on theater. And so I'd do all my work and I'd work hard. And then I had this outlet through my drama class where I was able to really release a lot of the maybe academic stressors I was going through. And then in undergrad, being able to work and volunteer really offered those to me as well to kind of say, okay, here's a space where I'm studying and I'm academic and I'm worrying about my grades. And then I'm able to step out of that space and fill a different role altogether. So I think I tried to embrace that as much as possible in medical school as well. And I played a role on the Calgary Medical Students Association here as the VP events. So I was really the event coordinator for our class. And that was a huge role that I think really amplified the way that I actually experienced medical school. So coming in, I definitely thought I was going to have my head low, do the work, be really quite low key about the whole experience. And then I ended up in this position where I was planning all the events for everyone. I was able to form really awesome connections with my classmates because I was playing this role, and I was able to really get to know people on a deeper level. So I think in that sense, not only was it a nice outlet for me to, when I didn't want to study, when I was feeling burnt out, to work on something else. But it was also an experience that I think amplified medical school for me altogether. So it really made the experience what it was.
Yeah, just adding on to that topic. I
Yeah.
know in South Asian homes and families, a lot of young people are told that their life should be centered around their academic journey and their studying and education. But as you mentioned, it's important to have outlets as well and extracurriculars to be successful. So in terms of the South Asian community, what has been your experience? And do you have a message for South Asian parents who believe that education is the only way?
Right. Great question. So growing up for me, in a South Asian family, for sure, I always thought, post-secondary wasn't even up for debate. It was the obvious next step for me that this is something I would do. And I don't regret that at all. But I do think that we put quite a lot of pressure on people to follow a certain path, that it's high school and then undergrad and then something big, something to prove that we've made it. And I think that really puts quite a lot of pressure on people in a way that it shouldn't. I think it's really, really important to work hard, and grades are, part of the process of getting your foot in the door. But once you're there, for example, practically at an interview, nobody's going to be asking you questions about, your study habits or your grades. They're going to be asking you about the experiences you've been part of, the opportunities you've been part of, and what you learned from those. And I think that's why it's so essential that you have other opportunities and other experiences in your life alongside working hard in school, because those are the things that are going to shape you to be who you are. And those are the things that you're going to find yourself tying into your identity, right? And those are the things that you find yourself defining yourself by. And so when you do have a grade that maybe isn't perfect, it's not the end of your world, because your entire identity isn't based off of being a perfect A student. It's based off of all of these other things that you're doing. You're a scholar, you're a reader, you're an athlete, you're a leader, you're a sister, a daughter, a friend, a family member. There are all these other things that define who you are outside of just your grades. And I think we don't highlight that enough. And I don't think we highlight the importance of how these opportunities and these experiences will then guide you. So I think back on the opportunities that I was grateful enough and fortunate enough to be a part of throughout high school and undergrad. And a lot of those things shaped my confidence. They shaped my resiliency. They shaped my core values. And those are the things that I carry with me as I proceed in my medical education, and then also as an adult in society, right? Like, those are the things that are going to teach you far more than what you're going to learn in a textbook. And I don't think we highlight that enough.
I would have to say, as a student, I love hearing that I'm more than just a grade. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess to our viewers as well, again, grades do not define you. So off of this volunteering progress, in our last episode of Gen Z Unfiltered, we actually talked about the importance of volunteering. And as you covered, volunteering was a major help for yourself and you loved it. But how did you manage your time while you were volunteering to make sure you're still keeping up with school, with your social life, and most important of all, how are you taking care of yourself? How many hours did you volunteer, and what did your week look like? How did you take care of it? How did you create that balance that you aspire for?
Great question. So I think if I could look back and talk to a younger version of myself, I think I would highlight that it's not about how many different opportunities you're a part of. It's about the opportunities. So I think as someone who was pursuing medical school, I never felt like I was a strong enough applicant because I was only involved in, this extracurricular and this extracurricular and this extracurricular. And there are people who are talking about their 20 different volunteer experiences. But I think at the end of the day, it's about what you're actually gaining from that experience and what you're giving to it. So what are you teaching other people through this role and what are you learning from it? And when you're able to talk about an experience in a way that it actually shaped who you are and it's something that you're actually passionate about, that shows. When you're writing about it, when you're talking about it, that comes across that this is something that actually shaped who you are. And I think that's really quite essential for younger viewers to understand. It's not about the quantity of things that you're involved in. It's about the commitment that you've made to something and what you're actually gaining from it, right? Whether it's you're having these amazing connections with people and they're able to give and take there, or it's about an experience that maybe you didn't actually enjoy. So sometimes that happens too. You think an experience is what you want it to be, you get involved, and it's not really giving you what you were hoping it would. And it's okay, I think, in situations like that to take a step back and say, this is not actually a productive use of my time. And so I will respectfully leave this position in whatever way it is. So if it was a 3-month volunteer contract, you just don't sign up again. And take your energy somewhere else in a place where you're actually passionate about it and something that I think you'll actually learn from. With regards to balance, so I definitely was somebody who really loved to say yes to opportunities. I like staying busy. I like being go, 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 go. And I think a lot of what I learned over time is, yes, it's important to say yes to opportunities, but it's also important to learn when to say no. So learning when I need to set boundaries was a huge learning curve for me. And I think not really something I had ever embraced until I started medical school and realized that I didn't have as much free time as I did before. So prioritizing the opportunities that I felt were most important to me, and then saying no to opportunities that maybe weren't the right fit for me or maybe weren't, actually feasible for me to be involved in. So those are probably the key topics that come to mind with regards to how I maintain my balance now. So coming into medical school, I was very nervous about how I was going to navigate friendships and my own relationships at home. I was fortunate enough to actually just stay at home for medical school. So I saw my family every day, whether that was maybe as much or as I wanted to, maybe not, but it was still nice being able to see them every day. But I was really worried about being able to make time for friends. And I actually became involved with boxing because one of my friends from undergrad dragged me along to a class. And so it was almost a 2 birds in 1 stone situation because it became this part of my week where it was dedicated time for me to work on my physical and mental health. And then it was also a time where I got to spend with my undergrad friends. So it was really one of the most amazing experiences I got to be part of throughout my medical school training. I think whenever I did find myself feeling overwhelmed and feeling like I was maybe getting close to a burnout point, making sure that I was reaching out to supports. So friends, family, the school themselves, if it ever came to that point, to just say, here is where I am. And you will find more often than not that people are jumping to help you. I know for me personally, I really struggle with asking for help because I am definitely type A personality. I will do everything by myself. And that's not a healthy way to go about adversity by any means. So learning to let go of control a bit and learning how to ask for help was a huge proponent in me being able to work on my own wellness and work on my own balance.
Wow, that's some really good advice. I know personally, all of that was so relatable because I do the exact same stuff, and I also need to learn how to say no and how to manage my time more frequently. But what are some of your favorite things, like more specific things that you do to avoid stress or de-stress when you're feeling overwhelmed?
Sure. So I probably in high school started a habit of making to-do lists for myself. So I'll often write what I actually need to get done and a relative framework of how I expect I will get it done. Obviously, as we've learned, things don't always go as planned, and sometimes what you have planned for 6 months from now just falls apart. But I think for me, managing my own stress, just having it out on paper for myself to say, here are all the things that need to get done. How will I do it? Having the visual was so helpful. I think to avoid stress, I really tried implementing a lot of techniques to ensure my own wellness. So I already kind of touched on physical health there. So I'm somebody who likes to stay physically active, whether it's with boxing or with yoga, with bar, with doing a home workout off of YouTube. I'm somebody who really likes to schedule aside that time for myself. I think as I was preparing for medical school interviews, I really got into the app Headspace about mindfulness and meditation. And that's something I've continued to hold on to, especially when I'm doing, overnight shifts. They always tell us, just go grab sleep when you can. But I'm somebody who is so stressed out when I'm trying to go to bed because I'm so nervous the pager's going to go off and I'm going to miss it. And so early on, that was something I really struggled with, and my sleep took a hit because I couldn't sleep at night out of fear I wasn't going to wake up. And so I, again, went back to my old strategy of using this app to help guide me to sleep, meditation and mindfulness to get me back to sleep, and then I'd be able to wake up just fine. So I was really worried that didn't have a solidified reason behind it. But I think catching little things like that where I was noticing this is my stressor, this is what I'm anxious about, and trying to come up with tools for myself in order to navigate those situations.
I've got to say, I love hearing you talk about all your experiences. I know I've learned a lot just from hearing about what you've done so far. And as we can tell, it's been quite a journey. So throughout the journey, what would you say was your biggest high, the biggest moment of I have done it, that just like your wind's blowing in your hair level? And what would you say was your biggest low, the moment where you were debating giving up?
Sure, those are great questions. So for biggest low, I will probably use an earlier example, only because I think it really shaped how the rest of my medical school journey looked like. So I actually didn't get into medical school the first time I applied, which I think is also really important for people to know, because I remember looking at the stats as I was applying and feeling so daunted that this was never going to be something that worked out for me. And then I interviewed here in Calgary and I got rejected the first year. And people were constantly telling me, just apply to the Caribbean, apply to the States, apply far away. You can always come back. And I was so stubborn and I was like, no, I am going to try again. I got an interview. I got this far. I can keep going. But I think for me, the reason I choose that as my biggest low is because it was really the first time I had experienced any sense of failure. So any opportunity I had signed up for or applied for leading up to that point, I had gotten. And so I didn't know what failure looked like. I did not know what failure felt like. And most importantly, I did not know how to navigate failure. And that was such a huge learning point for me. And honestly, it was essential for my own growth that I get to that point. So it was definitely, I think, the first of many lows, but the most important of the lows, because it was such a teaching point for me to learn how to navigate when things don't go the way that I expected them to. So I got rejected and I was now faced with the unknown of, what is this year going to look like? Because in my head, I was just going to be starting medical school in 2 months. And now that wasn't how things were going to play out. So really learning that sense of picking myself up and saying, okay, this happened. Now what? What do I have to do now in order to move forward? Because I knew that this was still something I wanted to do. I knew I was going to apply again, but it was a sense of I have all of this time and I have nothing to fill it with. So the first couple of months I was really quite lax about it, and I really used the time to travel and see the world and spend time with my friends and family. And then I got back in the fall of that year and was like, okay, I need a game plan. So I did my applications and I focused on what was actually within my control, because I had no say left at that point with things that were out of my control. But I really focused on the things that I could do, and I applied for a job that I think really shaped a lot of who I was going into medical school. And for those reasons, I feel like that year off was huge, and I would, if I could go back, I wouldn't even change it. I'm glad I had the year off. I'm glad I had that time to work on myself and grow and learn, because then when I did start medical school, I felt ready to be there. I would say the high then and that point is getting the email that I got in, because that was a moment for me to say, holy, like, I didn't get what I wanted, and that was the best thing that could have happened to me. But to have things work out the way that I wanted them to was huge and was so exciting. And really, I think both of those things combined is what shaped my mentality going into medical school, was to say things are not always going to go the way that I expect them to, but how will I navigate those scenarios? And that's definitely a teaching point that I carried with me throughout those first two years where we were learning from books and in lectures, and the information was maybe a little bit more overwhelming. And then over this last year and a half where we were navigating our clerkship rotations in the middle of a pandemic, right? So a lot of this last 3 years has been shaped by my earlier rejection. So I would say both my highs and lows came around my acceptance.
Wow, that's an interesting experience. The fact that even that you failed and you got up and kept going, it's just making me so inspired and excited to start university and see what's in store for the future. But I do have a question. So you said you took a year off and you were ready to be in medical school the next time.
Right.
But do you think if someone who is older, maybe let's say 30 or 40 years old, and they feel like they want to go to med school at that age, would you encourage it?
Oh, absolutely. So there are quite a lot of people in my class who are considered to be, mature students. And if you look at the stats, I think the average age shows up to be like 26 or 27. And so lots of people get in right out of high school, not out of high school, sorry, right out of undergrad, but lots of people don't. And I think the demographic that we really don't talk about enough is the group of people who didn't know initially that they wanted to be physicians. So people who they do their studies early on, they choose a totally different career path, and then some point in their career, they think, yeah, I actually think I want to pursue medicine. So I would say from a realistic point, I would probably ask them quite a lot more questions about, have they run the MCAT? Is that something that they're looking at? Do they have time to write this exam? Are they willing to apply to more than one school? What kinds of grades did they have when they were in undergrad? Because unfortunately, even if you are applying way down the line, your undergrad GPA does follow you. So I think the actual practicality and the logistics behind it, I would want to navigate a little bit more. But I definitely wouldn't say that age is a huge barrier with regards to applying. I think it often is actually a point of looking good for you, because I had 1 year off to work on myself. But if you have all of this experience working in a field that you really, I guess at that point would be considered to be an expert in, and you have all of this life experience that you can bring to the table, that really creates this unique applicant instead of, high school, undergrad, and then medical school being the obvious next step. So I would say I would definitely encourage them, if they feel that this is the right fit for them, to apply. And it is totally realistic that more mature students get in, because I can think of lots of people in my class who are in their 30s, less so in their 40s, but I would say 30 to 40, that age range, there are lots of people in my class that fall within that range. They may not have the exact same medical school experience that we do as younger students, because a lot of these people have partners and children and quote unquote adult responsibilities that they have to worry about. But at the end of the day, if the experience is what you want it to be, and we're all going to be MDs at the end, I think it's at least worth a shot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. you kind of proved the point that age is just a number, right? So if you
Absolutely.
really want to do something, it's in your heart, I say go for it, right? Well, thank you so much, Jasleen, for giving us your time and discussing all of these amazing topics with us. Is there anything you would like to add that maybe we didn't cover today?
I would say the one thing that comes to mind with this entire journey, whether it's somebody who's currently in undergrad and trying to apply to medical school, or somebody in your shoes in high school applying to starting undergrad, I think it would be to stay open-minded as much as possible. Like I mentioned earlier, I really didn't have a good sense of what other careers were out there for me. So I think there's all this pressure for us as South Asian, as members of the South Asian community, for us to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, to like prove that we have made it. But I think there are so many other meaningful careers out there that people may not actually know about. So really take the opportunity to be open-minded. Career exploration is huge when you're young, to see what's actually out there. I know in the times of COVID, that's maybe not the most realistic thing to see what other careers look like, but I was able to be part of the Sikh Youth Calgary mentorship program, which at the University of Calgary was a huge part of, an undergrad's experience of what real life looks like moving forward. So I had the really unique perspective to be the medical student mentor for some of the undergrad students. And I felt it was really valuable for them and for me. So I was learning so much from them about everything that they were going through. But for me to be able to kind of shape a timeline for them, shape their career goals, shape their own personal and professional skill sets, I think was huge. And for them, it was really an opportunity to get a sense of what medical school actually looks like, because there are so many things that I didn't know coming in. And so if it's medical school or something else, I would say learn a lot about what you think you're interested in. So if you want to be an accountant, get in contact with an accountant, see what their day-to-day life looks like, see what they struggled with, see what they really love about their jobs. Learn as much as you can, because you don't want to go in and then find all of this stuff out later and be like, oh no, like this is not what I wanted. That being said, of course, you can always change your mind. But I think really the most valuable thing you can do as a young learner is be really open-minded about the opportunities that come your way.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Today's episode was just eye-opening and so inspiring, and I'm really grateful that we had this opportunity to chat with you today. Ishkita, is there anything you would like to add?
No, you've covered it. I absolutely agree. I've learned so much from this episode alone. And thank you. Thank you so much for the insight you've shared. Because I have to say, as someone who's about to go into undergrad, there is a lot of anxiety about what it's going to look like, especially with COVID. And as you said, we never expected such a time to come, but it's here. And the one thing we've learned is to just, as you said, go with the flow. So thank you for sharing your experience with us today. I've learned a lot.
Thank you both for having me.
It was a pleasure.
It was really a pleasure. Well, thank you everyone for watching today's episode. I hope you learned just as much as we did. Jasleen's insight and advice was just awesome. We will see you next week with a new topic. And until then, peace out.